The hostess smiled at Emily Carter, the way people smile when they're not sure if you belong. The restaurant wasn't the fanciest place in town, but the velvet-backed booths and mirrored walls tried very hard to be. Candlelight trembled in low glasses. Cutlery sparkled like a row of sharp smiles. A Friday night hum-braided laughter with the clink of ice and the hiss of steaks touching hot iron. "Reservation?" the hostess asked. "Under Jason Miller?" Emily smoothed the only dress she owned that could be called a dress. The seam at the hip tickled her skin where she'd mended it with 3 uneven stitches. The hostess scanned the page, then nodded. "He's not here yet. You're early." "Right." Emily's voice sounded steadier than her hands felt. She had arrived 20 minutes ahead to do a head count of her courage. Her thumb worried the corner of a folded bill in her pocket. $5. The last of it. Bus fare home would have to be a prayer. The hostess led her to a small table by the window. Beyond the glass, the city moved in a cold, clean rush taxi lights skimming wet asphalt, umbrellas turning like dark flowers. Emily sat down and tucked her thrift store purse beside her chair like a secret. At the next table, a man in a pale gray suit sat with a little girl. The man's tie lay loosened, the kind of looseness that looks deliberate on some people and tired on others. On him, it looked like both. He had the stillness of a person who carried entire buildings in his head. The child, maybe 6, swung her legs and watched the door with the patience of a cat. "Daddy," she whispered, not as quietly as she thought. "Is it true the spaghetti here is braided?" "It's twirled," the man said, eyes amused. "Not braided. There's a difference, Miss Hayes." The girl giggled. "I'm not a miss, I'm Sophie." "Forgive me, Miss Sophie." Emily smiled despite herself, then checked her phone. No messages, no typing dots. She'd met Jason's friend at the cafe where she worked mornings tall, extroverted, hollow compliments spilling out of him like coins he didn't mean to spend. He'd insisted Jason was good people, a real gentleman, the kind who knew wine words and wore cufflinks. Emily had nodded and pretended she understood, because the truth was, she didn't understand any of it. She understood a double shift, a rent notice, the taste of tap water when you stretch groceries an extra week. She understood $5. A waiter floated in. "Can I start you with a drink?" "Just water," Emily said, trying not to see the price of everything unfold in her mind, like a ledger she was already guilty of. "With lemon, if that's okay." The waiter's pen paused. "Of course." At the next table, the little girl leaned towards Emily's. "I like lemon too," she announced to the air, as if the world were an audience. "That's lucky," the man said, "because they put lemon on everything here, even the check." Emily's laugh escaped before she could catch it. The man turned his head and their eyes met, briefly. He had that gray-blue color that looks like sky before a storm, or after one. He nodded politely, then returned to the small hurricane of Sophie's curiosity. Jason arrived 10 minutes late, with all the theater of a person who believed tardiness was a synonym for importance. He wore a navy blazer and a cologne that could have been named promotion. His smile landed on Emily like a stamp of approval he could peel off whenever he chose. "Emily? Wow." His eyes traveled her dress, her hair, the careful makeup she'd learned from YouTube at midnight with a borrowed mirror. "You're prettier than your pictures." She wanted to say she didn't have pictures. Her roommate did, and they shared a phone like they shared rent. Instead, she said, "Hi, Jason. Nice to meet you." He sat, barely glancing at the menu before dropping it like a prop. "I'm starving. The mushroom risotto here is life-changing." Emily flicked her eyes over the prices. The risotto cost 3 bus rides. The breadbasket, which she'd prayed would be free, had a price too. Somewhere inside her, a small, stubborn part lifted its chin. She would order carefully, drink water, and pay for herself. Dignity was sometimes just math done quietly. Jason talked in bright paragraphs about his job in real estate, which seemed to involve going to gyms in different neighborhoods and telling people they were buying lifestyle. He asked Emily what she did, and she told him the truth without apology. Mornings at a cafe, 3 afternoons a week at a thrift store, classes at night when she could afford them at the community college. He nodded as if she'd recited a dish he might try but probably wouldn't. "That's nice," he said vaguely. "Ambition is hot." Across from them, the gray-suited man spread a napkin on his lap. His hand was scarred at the knuckles, old white marks like healed lightning. He listened without meaning to. His attention was a habit that turned of its own accord towards pain, the way flowers turn towards light. Sophie, who had been coloring on a placemat, tilted her head, watching Emily with open concern that children can't hide. When the waiter returned, Jason ordered a bottle of wine without looking at the price. "You'll love it," he told Emily. "It's minerally, whatever that means." "I'll just stick with water, thanks," she said. Jason blinked. "You sure?" "Positive." He switched to talking about college football, which he followed like a religion. When the food came, he ate with the cheerfulness of someone whose hunger was uncomplicated. Emily took small, careful forkfuls of the least expensive thing on the menu, which turned out to be both modest and delicious. A bowl of lemony pasta, with blistered cherry tomatoes like rubies. "Do you live alone?" Jason asked. "With a roommate." "In what part of town?" "Southside." He whistled softly, half pity, half judgment. "Tough area. It teaches you to keep your head up." "The world teaches that," Jason said, as if he'd invented philosophy. He reached for the bread and paused. "You don't mind if I—" "Go ahead." She watched him dunk it in oil that tasted like summer and picked up her glass of water. The lemon wedge bobbed, bright and ridiculous. At the next table, Sophie tugged her father's sleeve. "Daddy," she said, less secretly this time, "why does that lady look like she's trying not to cry?" The man's eyes flicked to Emily, then back to his daughter. "Because sometimes grown-ups try very hard not to do things in public," he said softly. "Like cry, or sing." "I don't think she wants to sing." "I don't think so either." He set down his fork. He had no right to intervene. He had spent years building a wall between his life and other people's, a practical fortress for a practical man. But the wall had a door, and the door had hinges that creaked whenever he heard a voice like Emily's, careful, brave, economic in its hope. "Alexander," he told himself quietly, because sometimes he had to remind himself he was a person with a name and not just the company he ran. "Stay out of it." And for the moment he did. Jason's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his lips pulled sideways. "Shoot, I need to take this work thing." He pressed the phone to his ear and stood. 2 minutes. He didn't come back in 2 minutes. He didn't come back in 10. He didn't come back at all. Emily finished her little bowl of pasta slowly, like someone walking to the edge of a cliff with a suitcase. Her chest felt hollow and large. She kept her eyes on the napkin in her lap because if she looked at the door, hope would rise uninvited and then fall and shatter. The waiter approached with a polite smile and a folded leather bill holder. It could have been a love letter. It could have been a verdict. "Mr. Miller said he stepped outside to take a call," the waiter said, voice professionally neutral. "Yes," Emily said. Her hands were steady. "I'll take care of mine." He set the bill down and left. Emily opened it. Numbers blinked up. Jason's wine, which she hadn't touched. Jason's risotto, the bread, her pasta. The total smiled with its sharp teeth. A new creature appeared in her chest. Panic, but it was small and very polite, holding its hat in its hands. She did quick math, all the wrong answers appearing first. She had $5. She could wash dishes. She could call her roommate no. The phone was dead. She could plead. She lifted her head to find the waiter, practicing the sentence. "Could I please speak to the manager?" when the gray-suited man from the next table stood. "Excuse me," he said to the waiter first, then to Emily, careful to address the staff before he inserted himself into any narrative that wasn't his. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. We were accidentally charged for the bottle of wine and some items that aren't ours." He glanced at the bill and then at the table where Jason had Saturday. "Would you mind splitting the checks? We'll take care of this one." The waiter looked relieved. Problems that solve themselves count as miracles in hospitality. "Of course, Mr. Hayes." Mr. Hayes. The name was a bell rung in certain circles. Here it was just a sound. Emily felt heat crawl up her throat, embarrassment and gratitude sprinting neck and neck. "You don't have to," she began. "I know." He smiled, tired and kind. "But it's easier if I do." Sophie grinned openly at Emily like someone watching a magic trick and having no shame about wanting to see how it worked. When the waiter stepped away, Emily leaned forward. "I'll pay you back," she said. "I mean it. I don't do charity." "I believe you." Alexander's voice was a low, even line. "I didn't do it for charity." He glanced at the door, where the night kept its mouth shut. "I did it so your evening wouldn't be defined by someone else's absence." He hadn't meant to sound like that. He hadn't meant to tell her anything about himself, but grief had taught him the shape of absence. He could trace it like a scar under clothing. His wife's car, a summer storm, a truck that slid through a red light, a phone call he'd missed because he'd been in a meeting. He knew the cost of seconds. "Thank you," Emily said, the 2 words coming out heavier than they looked. "You're welcome," he said. "I'm Alexander. This is Sophie. She's been very interested in your lemon." Sophie leaned her chin on her hands. "Do you like to draw?" "Sometimes," Emily said, surprised into truth. "On receipts." "We draw on napkins," Sophie said importantly. "Daddy lets me break the rules if they're boring rules." Emily looked at Alexander. He shrugged. "Some rules," he allowed. "Some." Then gently. "Do you have a way home?" "Yes," Emily lied. "Good," he said. accepting the lie as a face-saving gift. We're waiting for a brownie that is apparently so good it's a law unto itself. Would you like to help us judge it? I shouldn't. Please, Sophie said. The brownie is big, and I am small. Emily sat at their table with the caution of a stray accepting food from a palm. They cut the brownie into 3 crooked squares. It tasted like forgiveness. By the time they left, the rain had quieted into something that merely wanted attention. Alexander walked them to the door, Sophie holding both his hand and Emily's, as if she were connecting battery terminals. Let me give you my number, Emily said before the courage could collapse, so I can repay you. Alexander took out his phone. Text me, he said. That way you won't have to memorize anything. She typed, This is Emily. Thank you. Good night, Emily, he said. Good night, she said to him, and then softer to the small hand that still held hers. Good night, Sophie. Sophie beamed. Good night, Emily. Emily stepped into the night and felt something change, not in the weather but in the geometry of things. The city didn't feel larger or smaller. It felt like a shape that could be learned. Emily's week returned to its usual choreography. Morning shift at the cafe, clothes that smelled like roasted beans, afternoons at the thrift store, sorting through the lives of strangers, nights in a room big enough to name a future in a whisper. Yet now there was a thread of text messages with a man whose voice had sounded like he knew how to keep a promise. How's your week? Alexander wrote. Sophie says hello. She also says the brownie was a 9, which means she believes in dessert after truth. Emily replied from a 5-minute break while steaming milk. I'm an 8 on brownies as a lifestyle choice. Hi to Sophie, and thanks again. Still planning to repay you. Payday Friday. I'll consider it a loan without interest, Alexander wrote, but I'm interested in how your day goes. That counts? She laughed into her phone like a teenager. She told him about the woman who tried to return a lamp because it gave her gothic shadows. She told him about a community college class she wanted to take in the fall, Intro to Design Principles. He told her nothing about his company, except once, when he said he'd had a meeting that felt like being asked to explain weather. She told him about a childhood in a town where everyone knew your middle name and your groceries. He told her about a house where every picture was of the 3 of them, where one person was missing and still in every frame. Sometimes Sophie sent a voice note that was just a bubbling stream of consciousness. Emily, I saw a dog that looks like a croissant, and Daddy says we should not name other people's dogs even in our heads, but his name is definitely Butter. On Thursday, an email landed in Emily's inbox from a company called Hayes North. The logo was clean lines and an H that looked like a bridge. The message came from an HR address. We were impressed by your portfolio and would like to invite you to an interview for a junior design assistant position on Monday at 10 a.m. She read it 3 times, brain refusing to organize itself around the words portfolio, impressed, interview. She did not have a portfolio. She had napkin sketches, receipt doodles, a dozen hand-lettered price tags the manager at the thrift store had inexplicably loved. The email named a woman called Marisol Green as the hiring manager and gave an address uptown, in a building where the elevator probably had an ego. She texted Alexander, hands shaking with hope that felt like a trick. Weird question. Does your company have an office on 57th Street? We do, he wrote. Why? I just got an interview notice. For a junior design assistant. I didn't apply. A long pause. She imagined him in a high room looking at a horizon made of schedules. You should go, he wrote. Did you do this? Another pause, this one shorter. I sent your name to a friend. She must have asked HR to reach out. You mentioned design. You should have the chance to be seen doing the thing you want. She stared at the text until the letters felt like a language she'd learned in a past life. She wanted to be angry in the feral way of a person guarding her dignity with her teeth. She also wanted to cry because kindness always lowered the drawbridge she kept raised. She also wanted to laugh because the world had just done that thing it sometimes did where it pretended to be a story. Okay, she typed. I'll go. But I'm not a pity project, Alexander. I know. A beat. I don't pity you, Emily. I recognize you. On Monday, she wore a blouse that made her feel like future tense. The receptionist smiled like a person paid to smile, and also like she meant it. Marisol Green met her in the lobby with a handshake that was warm but not performative. The interview was less of a test and more of a conversation. Emily showed napkins and price tags, and the way she thought about white space like a kindness. She spoke about design not as decoration but as empathy, a way to guide someone's eyes so their heart could arrive a little sooner. Marisol nodded, scribbled, asked real questions. At the end, she said, We teach tools. We can't teach taste. You have taste and you have grit. That's 2/3 of what makes a good designer. What's the other third? Emily asked, hope trying to stand up without falling over. Look, Marisol said. Or timing? Or both? When Emily left the building, her phone pinged. A message from Alexander. How did it go? She typed, I didn't embarrass myself, and Miss Green is either the best actor or the real deal. I'm glad, he sent. A new bubble appeared before she could pocket the phone. Dinner to celebrate? Somewhere casual. Sophie insists on French fries. I can't afford. I invited you, he wrote. You'll repay me in bad puns. Sophie has a quota to meet. Emily wanted to say yes. She wanted to stand in the bright little circle that seemed to follow Alexander around, even though she suspected he didn't see it. But a voice in her head older, wearing her mother's thrifted coat and her father's pride, whispered caution. Accepting help was one thing, becoming an orbit was another. Okay, she wrote finally, but I'm bringing coupons. Deal. At a diner with sticky menus and waitresses who called everyone honey, Sophie told Emily long, meandering stories about kindergarten politics. Alexander listened like it was a board meeting, which is to say attentively, with questions. Emily ate fries like a citizen, and not a supplicant. When the bill came, Alexander paid with the matter-of-factness of a person tipping gravity. It wasn't a romance. It was a slow unfreezing. 2 weeks later, HR emailed again. We'd like to offer you the position. Start date, 2 Mondays from now. Salary, more than she'd ever seen on paper with her name on it. Benefits, healthcare that sounded like sorcery. Optional note, welcome. Emily cried on the bus, quietly, in a way that made the woman across the aisle hand her a tissue without comment. She texted Alexander 3 words. I got it. You earned it, he replied immediately. Did you? No, he wrote. I didn't. Marisol would fire me for trying. Also, HR is scarier than my board. Emily laughed out loud. The bus driver glanced at her in the mirror and smiled because it's a good thing to see someone in your city laughing to themselves. That night, her roommate baked a cake out of 2 cupcakes and a dream. Emily blew out 1 candle shaped like a number that wasn't her age but was on sale, and didn't wish for anything because sometimes gratitude is more honest than greed. For a while, time behaved. Mornings at Hayes North were like waking up in a place where ideas were paid rent with time and attention. Marisol mentored with the swiftness of a person who understood not everyone had a cushion to fall on. Emily learned software that had terrified her 2 months ago. She designed a campaign for a small nonprofit that needed a voice louder than its budget. She started to carry herself like someone who expected to take up space. After work, she sometimes met Alexander and Sophie at the park, where Sophie climbed structures shaped like problems and solved them with laughter. Emily sat on a bench with Alexander and talked about small things, fictional dogs named Butter, soup recipes, the best number of minutes to steep tea, and large things, how grief lives in a house, moving rooms without knocking, how money is a translator that makes the world legible. One evening, as the sky did that trick, where it turns the whole world gold, just to prove it can, Sophie fell asleep in the car before her milkshake did. Alexander carried her upstairs like a promise. Emily stood in the doorway, unsure whether to linger or leave. The apartment was minimal and warm, with photos on the walls. A woman whose smile used to live in this home like a lamp. Emily felt the presence of the missing, without feeling threatened by it. Coffee? Alexander asked. Coffee, she said. They stood in the kitchen, with mugs that matched nothing and everything. He leaned against the counter. She sat on a stool and watched him the way a person watches a city, keeping her distance, loving the chaos. I didn't ask you something, she said, because the question had been living rent-free in her chest. What do you actually do at Hayes North, besides frighten HR? He smiled, and the smile had edges. I'm the CEO. The 3 letters landed between them like a dropped dish. Emily picked them up carefully, feeling for cracks. That's a job, she said, because her brain had staged a brief walkout. It is, he agreed. He waited for judgment the way some people wait for thunder, braced, resigned. He found instead a quiet. So when you say you had to explain the weather, she said, you mean the stock market? Sometimes, he said. Sometimes I mean people. She left that night with her heart walking beside her like a friend. She didn't tell anyone about Alexander because the story would fall apart if she spoke it too loudly. She had known jobs to evaporate when named too soon, relationships to shrink if shown to the wrong light. She kept it like a coin in the pocket of her life, thumb rubbing the edge for luck. Marisol dropped the folder on Emily's desk like an invitation. You're good, she said. Time to be useful in a way that will hurt. I'm listening. Alex wants you on a rebrand pitch for a client that doesn't know what it is anymore. You're going to help it, remember. You'll have 2 weeks. You'll sleep some. Emily tried to keep her face neutral and failed. Alex? Mr. Hayes? Marisol amended, with mock formality. You can say, Alex. Everyone else does. The team assembled in a glass-walled conference room that looked out over the city like an astronaut looks out over a planet. There were designers with haircuts you couldn't do at home, and strategists with notebooks full of beautiful hieroglyphics. Alexander sat at the end of the table, which felt like the beginning. He didn't run the meeting like a king. He ran it like a conductor who knew the cello mattered as much as the violin. Emily, he said in a tone that made it clear he expected competence, not miracles. Walk us through your initial impressions. She did. She talked about the client's lost compass, their name that sounded like a question mark, the way their store layouts shouted and then whispered, leaving customers unsure whether they were welcome. She showed a mood board that didn't look expensive. It looked clear. When she finished, the room was hushed in the way rooms are when people are rearranging assumptions. Good, Alexander said simply. Very good. After the meeting, he passed her in the hallway and didn't do the thing men in power sometimes do, where they make eye contact like a secret handshake. He treated her like a colleague. It made her want to trust him more, and forgive him less, for making her want to trust him. They worked late. The office, emptied of chatter, took on the soft focus of a church at midnight. Emily stayed because she belonged, because belonging had a sound, and it was the hum of a printer and the murmur of someone ordering takeout and calling everyone by name. She texted her roommate that she'd be late. She texted Sophie a goodnight shaped like a cat emoji. She didn't text Alexander, because he was 6 desks away. On the Thursday before the pitch, Emily's computer froze and crashed with the theatricality of a teenager. She swore, softly, in a way that would have made Sophie gasp and then imitate her. She went to IT. IT told her to breathe and try again. She did, and it worked, because machines are complicated and also simple. When she returned to her desk, she found a small paper cup with a napkin tucked around it like a scarf. On the napkin, in a handwriting that had never needed to try, was a note. Hot chocolate from the break room. Not technically coffee. She drank it and hated that something inside her turned on like a light. The pitch went well. The client called the work brave, which is how scared people compliment honesty. They signed. The office erupted in unpracticed joy. Marisol hugged Emily and whispered, I like being right. That weekend, Sophie had a school fair. Alexander texted a photo of Sophie, with a face painted like a tiger, and a smile painted like pure intent. Emily was in the thrift store, pricing a jacket that still smelled like good perfume. Come by if you're free, he wrote. There's a cakewalk. I didn't know that was a thing. I'm at work, she sent. But bring me a tiger roar by voice note. He did. It was ferocious and also 6. On Monday, a door opened and all the light ran out. Emily was at her desk, lettering a headline that wanted to be both gentle and firm, when she heard a voice behind her say her name, the way a person says the name of a city they've only seen on postcards. Emily? She turned. Jason Miller stood there in a suit that looked more expensive and less clean than the one from the restaurant. His hair had been persuaded to lie a certain way. He smiled like the world owed him interest. Jason, she said, the syllables dry as bone. I had no idea you worked here, he said, which was a way of saying he hadn't thought about her at all except as a story he told to himself. Small world. Not really, she said. He glanced around, eager to be seen, knowing. I'm here to see Alex Hayes. We're talking about a potential investment opportunity. He's a good friend of my boss. I should have called you after that night. You know Howard Island? I do, she said. I know exactly Howard Island. He leaned on her desk as if daring it to hold him. You look different, he offered. Employed? He laughed, missing the target. Better, upgraded. Marisol appeared like a weather system. Mr. Miller, she said, cool and sharp. Conference room B. Jason straightened. Right. See you around, Em. She didn't say anything. He walked away with his grin, trying to keep up with his stride. She returned to her work and found that her hands were shaking. Not because Jason mattered, not because the past had knocked, but because a thread tugged at something she hadn't dared examine, the exact shape of how her life had braided itself into Alexander's. At lunch, she walked to the park and sat on a bench in the watery winter Sunday. Alexander found her there, not because he'd tracked her, he would never, but because he also liked the sky the way it looked from this angle. Hey, he said, not sitting until she nodded that he could. Jason Miller came by. I noticed, she said. Did you tell him I'm not a good investment? I suggested he try the deli downstairs and never come back, Alexander said, deadpan. Then, gentler, are you okay? Yes, she said. Then, because the truth had never forgiven her lies. No, a little. He waited. Did you get me this job? She asked. Not the introduction or the encouragement. The job. No, he said, and the word was clean. I didn't. Marisol did. Your work did. But you opened the door. I pointed at a door you could have found on your own a week later, he said. Timing is a kind of mercy, not a favor. She thought about that, trying not to let gratitude undo the knots she'd tied to keep her shape. Emily, he said carefully, if any of this makes you feel small, tell me, and I'll make it stop. She shook her head. It makes me feel seen. That's scarier. Me too, he said, so quietly she almost missed it. They went back to the office like two people returning to a city whose streets they had mapped separately and now walked together. For a while it was good. For a while, life was a series of steady mornings and evenings full of small, precise joys. Emily learned to buy fruit without counting coins in her palm first. Sophie learned to spell Wednesday without crying. Alexander learned that happiness is not a betrayal, that joy is not a door closing on grief, but a window opening in the same room. Then the secret broke. It happened stupidly, the way many important things happen. Emily was in the copy room, coaxing a temperamental printer into remembering it was a servant, not a god, when she heard two junior designers whispering with the ecstasy of gossip. And then Alex found her in a restaurant, paid her bill, and basically sponsored her. Like a fairy godfather but hot. HR says he pulled her resume from thin air. Marisol says it was his idea. Wouldn't it be amazing to be chosen like that? To be discovered? Emily stood very still. It wasn't the facts that hurt, it was the narrative. Sponsored, chosen, discovered. The verb stripped her into an object, a statue carved by someone else's hands. She walked past them without asking them to lower their voices, because shame does that makes you quieter than the people who cause it. She found Marisol in her office, back straight, eyes kind. Is it true? Emily asked. Marisol removed her glasses in a way that bought her 3 seconds. What exactly? That Alex found me, that he pulled strings. Marisol's mouth pressed into a line that said both, I didn't say that, and I could have stopped it being said. Alex mentioned your name. I told HR to meet you. Then you took it from there. Why does everyone think he made me? Because people worship myths, Marisol said simply. It's easier than seeing the work, and because Alex is Alex, he breathes, and rumors stand up and do yoga. Emily laughed, but it was the brittle kind that cuts the tongue. I need to go. Emily, I need to go, she repeated, because the only way to keep from crying in front of someone you respect is to leave before you are a person again. It rained like a cliché. It rained like a movie. The city washed itself in public. Emily didn't have an umbrella. She liked walking in the rain because it confused tears. She turned corners until she wasn't sure what she was turning away from. Her phone buzzed. Alexander, are you okay? She stared at the screen and then typed. Did you tell people you found me? No. Did you tell anyone you paid for my dinner? No. They know. Gossip is a beast that feeds on air, he wrote. Stay where you are. I'll come to you. Don't. She sent the word before her heart could tie it to her wrist and pull. Please don't. She shut her phone off like slamming a door. Rain threaded her hair into ropes. Her dress clung and she didn't care. She walked without destination until the map of her anger and the map of the city overlapped. She found herself in front of the restaurant where it had all started. The window reflected a ghost in a wet dress. She went inside and sat at the bar and ordered coffee. She wrapped her hands around it like a life raft. She remembered the taste of that first brownie and hated that memory for being kind. Rough day? The bartender asked, not unkindly. Just wet, she said, because you are allowed to lie to strangers if the truth would make them want to fix you. She paid with a 10 and told him to keep the change because she could. The flex didn't feel like victory. It felt like proof she was different now, which was both comfort and suspicion. When she stepped back outside, Alexander stood across the street in the rain without an umbrella like a penitent. He didn't cross until she nodded. He approached slowly, as if she were a wild thing in a park he wanted to respect. I didn't tell them, he said, before she could ask. I didn't even tell Marisol we'd met before your interview. I told her later, after she'd already decided. It doesn't matter if you told them, she said, voice flat with effort. They know. They'll always know. And every time I do something right, they'll believe it's because you, what? Planted me? Watered me? Paid for my polish? People will believe convenient stories, he said. We can't stop that. I can, she said, by making a different story. He closed his eyes and opened them again, the way a person might, if they needed to reset the horizon. Are you leaving? He asked. Not the job, she said, and his chest unstuck. Then, you. He flinched, not because he was fragile, but because he was honest. Because of what they say? Because of what it does to me, she said. I don't know how to hold both things. What you did was kindness. Everything since has been more, but the story around it could drown me. Tell me what to do, he said, a plea disguised as a question. Nothing, she said. That's the worst part. There's nothing for you to do except stand very still and let me decide if I can live with the noise. He nodded, because he understood stillness as a job. He had held still while surgeons told him there was nothing to be done. He knew what it felt like to be useless in the face of a force with a name. Emily, he said, and the name was an anchor and a bird. When you walk away, take this with you. I didn't help you because I felt sorry for you. I helped you because I recognized something I couldn't ignore. If you never speak to me again, that will still be true. She believed him. It didn't solve anything. She walked away because she had to see if she could. Days passed. They were loud and quiet by turns. Emily worked with an excellence that looked like anger from a distance and like discipline up close. Marisol gave her space the way a good captain gives wind to a sail. Sophie sent a video of her class goldfish that made Emily cry in a grocery store aisle beside a pyramid of oranges. At night, Emily went home to a room that was both more and less than before. She slept poorly and dreamed in black and white, which happens when your life loses a color you weren't finished using. One evening, her doorbell rang. She looked through the peephole and saw rain hair and a gray suit that had stopped pretending to be invincible. She opened the door. "Can I come in?" Alexander asked. He held nothing in his hands, which was smart. Men who bring flowers to apologies often end up apologizing for the flowers. "Yes," she said, standing aside. Her apartment was small and clean and wore its thrift comfortably. He stood in the kitchen because there was nowhere else to stand and began in the middle because beginnings felt false. "I've spent my whole life building things," he said. "Companies, schedules, compartments. I built a narrative so I could live in it. I'm competent. I'm necessary. I'm safe. Then I saw you in a restaurant trying very hard to make $5 behave, and I remembered something I keep forgetting. I want to build things that make room for other people. And I want to—" He stopped, because honesty sometimes requires a breath. "I want to build a life where you exist." Emily leaned against the counter next to him because distance is also a language. "That sounds like a pitch," she said, but her mouth softened at the edges. "It's not," he said. "A pitch asks and assumes. This is a confession. I'm in love with you. If that makes this worse, tell me and I'll take it back to my car, and I'll keep it there until it stops. But I suspect it won't." She stared at him like he was a map of a place she wanted to visit and feared she couldn't afford. "I don't want to be a rumor," she said. "I don't want to be a line in a story about how you saved someone, and she became pretty in proximity to you." He flinched at the accuracy. "I don't want that either," he said. "I don't want to save anyone. I want to be next to you while you save yourself." Silence grew between them like a plant that was either shade or shelter. "What about Sophie?" Emily asked. "Because love is not a theory, it's logistics. What about being a family if this becomes that?" Alexander smiled, and this time there were no edges. "Sophie already calls you the lemon lady when she's pretending not to like how much she likes you. She asked me last week if it was okay to love two moms. I told her it's okay to love good people, period. I'm not asking you to be anything right now except yourself. If it becomes more, we'll make room." She closed her eyes. The rain spoke on the window in nouns. Inside, the kitchen smelled like the coffee they weren't drinking. "Okay," she said finally, the word choosing her as much as she chose it. "But we go slow, and we set rules, and we say the quiet things out loud when they start to get loud in our heads." "Yes," he said. "Please, yes." She laughed, because Joy had missed her, and was late, and wearing a ridiculous hat. "You were going to wait in your car if I said no?" she asked. "I was prepared to sit until the neighborhood watch called the police," he admitted. "Romantic," she teased. "Desperate," he corrected, but he was smiling. When he pulled her into his arms, it wasn't a rescue. It was a meeting at a midpoint they had both walked hard to find. His kiss tasted like rain and a promise he wouldn't be careless with. A small sound came from the doorway, half sneeze, half gasp. They broke apart to find Sophie, wrapped in a pink raincoat with ducks, blinking at them like a detective who had solved everything. "I told Daddy not to ring the bell a lot," she announced, "but I thought maybe you needed me to be a bridge." Emily knelt, laughing through tears she didn't need to hide. "Hi," she said. Sophie walked over and put her hands on Emily's cheeks with the tenderness of a person petting a cat. "Are you my lemon lady forever?" she asked, not because she needed a legal answer, but because children like rituals. "Let's start with for dinner," Emily said. "And then breakfast, and then we'll see." "Okay," Sophie said, satisfied by an honest schedule. They ate grilled cheese on plates that didn't match and talked about whether ducks wear coats because they are polite. Later, after Sophie fell asleep in a nest of throw blankets, Alexander stood at the window and watched the city exhale steam like a dragon getting ready to sleep. "This won't be easy," Emily said, joining him, her shoulder against his. "People will talk. They always do." "Let them," he said, not with arrogance but with calm. "They can write their myths. We'll write our minutes." She looked at him, surprised. "Minutes?" "The record of what actually happened," he said. "Who said what? Who showed up? Who paid? Who cooked? Who forgave whom? The only story that matters." She nodded. She knew something about records that the world will never see. She leaned her head on his shoulder and allowed herself to be tired, which is different from being weak. He rested his cheek against her hair and allowed himself to be happy, which is different from being done. In the morning, the rain had made the city new again. The streets glittered. The sky practiced blue. The three of them ate cereal in the kitchen and invented a game where you have to guess which shape the milk makes in your bowl. Sophie saw a rabbit. Alexander saw Texas. Emily saw a heart that looked like a geography lesson. Later, on her way to work, Emily passed the restaurant where it had begun. She paused, not to measure the distance between then and now, but to say a quiet thank you to the table where a girl with $5 had chosen to show up anyway. She kept walking. The day opened like a door. People talked, because they do. Some said sponsored. Some said chosen. Some said lucky. Emily learned to let the words pass like weather around a building built on good bones. She kept her job, and her humor, and her stubborn tenderness. She paid Alexander back for the dinner in 100 small, real ways. A thermos of coffee on the mornings he forgot, a note tucked into Sophie's backpack that said, "Your reading log is a map to treasure," a picture frame repaired with gold glue, the Japanese way so the crack became a feature, not a flaw. On the anniversary of the brownie, they went back to the restaurant. They ordered the same dessert and divided it into 3 squares, less crooked than the first time because everything had practice now. Sophie lifted hers and said, "2 minutes." "2 minutes," Alexander said. "2 minutes," Emily echoed, and smiled at the way a life can be made, out of quiet records, out of weather and answers, and the stubborn choice to show up with $5 and a whole heart, and keep showing up even when it rains.